So let's start with the renaming of the D League to the G League. How did that come about, and what's behind it?
So it came about based on conversations over a series of years. Indra Nooyi was very involved. Of course, the CEO of PepsiCo, Brett O'Brien, who runs Gatorade, Jeff Kearney, also the head of sports marketing for Gatorade. It wasn't one of those deals that came together quickly. It began with a few conversations at games where we said, we're thinking about renaming the league. I was joking earlier with one of your colleagues that several players have come up to me over the years and said, sort of, who's in charge of marketing? I don't think this D League thing is all that. I was like, all right, I take responsibility. Right. It was development, it got shortened to D, I understand. Everybody keeps saying, that's not a good grade, you know. So we thought it was a good opportunity to rename it, but we also thought this was an opportunity to bring in a marketing partner, but also to do something endemic. There were some other companies that we were talking to and interest was expressed in the marketplace, but we were really looking for something that would seem like a natural fit in sports. And so and in all honesty, I was only focused on Gatorade initially as Gatorade League. They came up with this notion through their marketing of G, which they use all over the place. It seems obvious now, but that we should go from D League and nickname it G League. And so it's very exciting to us. It'll help through the might of Gatorade and PepsiCo through all their marketing to sort of get the word out in this league. And it coincides perfectly with some changes we've made in the league. We've added two-way contracts next season, so there'll in essence be two NBA players now in every D League who have a direct contractual relationship with the parent club. So, for example, if Phil Jackson is teaching the triangle, he can teach the triangle to two players on a development league team, knowing that they'll know the system and be prepared to come up to the mothership.
Interesting. I mean, when you talk about sort of a brand like Pepsi or Gatorade specifically in this, it seems like brands are becoming a little bit more creative, maybe even a bit more demanding when they're talking to leagues and talking to teams. Why is that? And is it just sort of innovation, or what's going on there?
I credit it with innovation. I think in part it's where the marketplace is driving them. In many ways, there's competition that didn't exist for many of these companies 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. There's a global marketplace. I think digital media, in essence, the same thing that's happened to the NBA, where we're competing against entertainment options in 215 countries and territories now through delivering our games on tablets and smartphones. Those brands are competing in the same way, and they're looking to differentiate themselves, and they're looking to break through, and premium live sports is one of the ways to do that.
And one of the ways that you have sort of pushed outside is to even go into the virtual world. Video games obviously has driven a lot of sort of consumption and maybe even fandom. Where do you see that going next when you have an esports league at this point?
Right, so just last week we announced the NBA 2K esports league, and so the notion there is, again, to take advantage of this huge user base we already have with our NBA 2K game, but now not NBA players, but to have professional gamers come in and compete. And so it'll be the E-Mavericks against the E-Bucks. They'll sign players, we'll have a draft. And one of the advantages, though, in the e-gaming virtual world is, unlike the NBA where you have to be an exceptional athlete, maybe 7 feet tall, maybe 6 feet tall, at least 5 feet tall.
Right.
In the world of e-gaming, you can be of any size, shape, nationality, ethnicity, where you can live wherever and only come together for certain competitions. You can practice on your own endlessly. You can, in essence, be any age. So it opens up this huge pool of consumers to us, both who are going to be competing in the matches, but also there's increasingly, I'm sure you've followed this, a huge following of e-gaming competitions, whether it's on Twitch, whether it's the new league that Turner Sports has created, what they call the E-League. I know Strauss Zelnick of Take-Two told me there's roughly 250 million people now in the world that are closely following these e-gaming competitions. So it's an exciting new business for us. We intend to launch in 2018. We're still figuring out exactly how the competition's going to work, but I'm really excited about it.
So you mentioned this idea of sort of global consumption. I mean, how does that sort of shift your revenue as a league over time? And how are the owners thinking about it? How are you thinking about it? And what's that mix look like 5-10 years from now?
I think it's inevitable that the split will continue to change. I mean, we're somewhere over 20% now of our revenue is generated outside the United States. China is our number one market outside the United States. Canada has become a huge market for us. Latin America, Europe. We're increasingly doing things in Africa, India as well. And so we look at the world, I'm sure, like a lot of other multinational corporations that are based in the United States. It's okay, US is less than 5% of the global population, here's our opportunity. But we're also seeing it in terms of our players. I mean, think of the impact Yao Ming had, for example, on our audience in China. We now hit a point this season where 25% of our players are born outside the United States. And that's only going to grow because there's that large a pool of players playing outside the United States competing for these jobs.
Yeah. Very close to home here in New York, over the weekend you stepped into purposefully a situation between Charles Oakley and the Knicks management. Where does that go from here, and why did you feel the need to step in?
I felt the need to step in because I've known Charles Oakley for a long time, probably at least 20 years since he was a player, and now as a retired player. He's done things with the league office over the years, and so he's someone I know has a big heart, and I think he feels he was misunderstood. And then conversely, of course, with Jim Dolan and the Knicks, it was just a very bad situation. I think, it was one of those moments that should have never happened. I think that it's difficult from a security standpoint to say exactly what should have happened once the confrontation began, but all I know is that these are the kinds of things that you work to avoid, and you work by building relationships so they never happen. And I had the sense that if I got the two of them to sit down together face to face, they were this close to each other, talking directly to each other, they would both get a chance to get off their chest, how they were feeling about the situation and move towards a reconciliation. And Michael Jordan joined us as well. Of course, not only is he now an owner, but he's a former teammate and close friend of Charles Oakley. I thought he did an excellent job sort of also as a mediator, just helping both sides see each other's issues. And so I hope where it goes from here is that, again, Jim Dolan invited Charles Oakley to come as his guest to a game at Madison Square Garden. I talked to Charles about doing additional things with the league. We do things not only around the United States, but around the world, and just building back the relationship. It's no question that the New York fans love him, and so I'm saying, let's just get you back out there being part of the NBA family, and let's resolve this matter sort of within the family, and that's how it was left.
And you feel like it's resolved at this point to your satisfaction?
Yeah, well, it's one of these things. I recognize that a lot had built up over many years, especially with Charles, and I think it's one of those things that wasn't going to get resolved overnight. He was very emotional about the meeting, and I understood that, and I think Jim and Michael Jordan understood that as well. So I think it's one of the things, one step at a time, but the first step was getting them together. I thought it was, I was appreciative of Jim Dolan saying, come back to the Garden, come as my guest to a game, and let's go from there. And they shook hands, and frankly, they both looked at each other at the end, and they both apologized. And I thought that, again, the very important first step.